guys, and welcome back to Miss Harlow's Quarantine Reads, where I talk to you about what I've been reading while we're on extended leave. Today's quarantine read is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. This book is really hard to talk about because it does a lot of things, and it is a lot of things. It starts out as a modern general fiction story about a middle-aged man who has just left a funeral, and he decides to drive out to his childhood home in the middle of the British countryside. And as he's driving, he remembers that he had a friend who lived at the bottom of the lane. So he drives down to see if her farm is still there. Well, it turns out the Hempstocks still own that property, and they let him go back and visit the pond that Letty, his friend, always called the ocean. And as he's sitting there and remembering the spring that he met Letty Hempstock, the story shifts and becomes a modern fairy tale. Let's talk a little bit about what makes a fairy tale, modern or otherwise. A fairy tale is a story often intended for children that features fanciful and wondrous characters such as elves, goblins, wizards, and even though not necessarily fairies. Fairy tales are often traditional. Many were passed down from storyteller to storyteller before being recorded in books. In this sense, we're talking about your classics. The Snow Queen, Little Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel, Rumpelstiltskin, all of those stories. So what makes a story a modern fairy tale? The term modern fairy tale is relatively new and very loosely defined. I'm applying it to The Ocean at the End of the Lane for two reasons. One, the magic. In a lot of contemporary fantasy fiction, magic plays by rules. The magic is defined, and it's almost more of a science than magic. That is not the case in this book at all. The magic in Ocean at the End of the Lane is giant. It is a part of the planet, it is a part of our world, and it is unknowable. You can never know all of it, you can never understand all of it, and that's just the way it is. There are a lot of questions the narrator never asks, and you never get answers to, and that's okay. And then secondly, the tone. The tone of the narration is very straightforward. He's 7 years old. He's telling you what happened to him as he remembered it. And so I found myself asking a lot, can I trust what I'm being told? Can I trust what I'm seeing? Because think about your memories from when you're 7. Memories erode over time. How well do you remember being a little kid? And so I constantly was asking myself, is this actually what happened, or is this how he chose to process painful events in his childhood? And so I thought that part of the narration was really brilliant, because you're constantly kind of like, you want to buy into this magic and this whimsy and a little bit of terror, but you're also just kind of second guessing it the whole time. Language-wise, very straightforward. There are moments of really, really beautiful language and metaphor, but it is thin. Like, it doesn't happen a lot, which only makes it that much more powerful when you do have this really beautiful line, right? Because they're not all over the place. So that would be why I would consider this a modern fairy tale, because of how it felt to read it and because of how the magic was treated. I listened to this as a digital audiobook from Audible. I do my best to listen to Neil Gaiman books whenever I can because he narrates them, and he does a wonderful job. He has a delightful narrating voice, and because he wrote the books, he knows how they should be read. So he, as always, does a wonderful job, and I was very happy to listen to this book. What else can I say? It's not very long. It was like five-ish hours on Audible, so probably a little over 200 pages, I would imagine. If that. So, not a big book. If you're thinking Neil Gaiman sounds familiar, it's because he's written like a bajillion things. His most popular titles are probably Good Omens, which he co-wrote and was recently turned into a television show, Stardust, which is also a movie, and Coraline, which is also a movie. He's also written Neverwhere, Graveyard Book, I don't know, like a million other things. He's very popular, very prolific, has a ton of stuff out there, and all of it that I've consumed is fantastic. So I highly recommend him. The stuff we own by him is, I think, all in YA fiction, so you can find him there. We own several of his books. This book would be in adult fiction if we owned it. There is some implied sex and some violence, nothing graphic in either category. But I think there's a lot of crossover appeal here. Even if you're not like one of these all-star high-flying readers, it's not complex, so you could probably jump in on this one too. I think that's all I have for you guys today. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you're doing and what you're up to. I'd be happy to hear from you. And then I'll be back soon with another quarantine read.